Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to my dining room.
I love your dining room. I love your dining room. And by the way, everyone, just move your head a little bit to the right. Everyone, you have to see this new award.
Right.
This new award that Caroline received at a very, very special conference. The Sovereignty Conference, Ribonut Conference of Women in Green, that you received that award and you spoke at. And what do you think? What do you think?
Well, I got to tell you, I didn't go in there expecting to think anything. I thought, great, this is an important conference, and I'm glad to be participating, let alone getting an award, which was really nice. But I got to tell you, I got there a bit earlier than I had to be there, and I was just listening to speech after speech of really important policymakers in Israel. And all of them were saying, we have to apply Israeli sovereignty, we have to apply Israeli law to Judea and Samaria, and we have to do it now. And it was really empowering, because it just shows that in a very short period of time, my book came out 3 years ago.
Right.
March 4th, 2014.
If you don't have Caroline's book yet, now is the time to buy it.
The Israeli Solution, a one-state plan for peace in the Middle East.
There we go. Buy it because it's more applicable now than ever before if you haven't read it yet.
It's being applied. That's the thing that's so amazing is that, as a writer, I get frustrated and annoyed a lot of times, and I say, what am I writing? All of these people are in charge and nobody's listening, or it doesn't matter what I say.
Right.
And then suddenly, everybody is saying we have to apply Israeli law to Judea and Samaria. The Likud ministers are saying it, the Beit Yehudi ministers are saying it, the public is saying it. The opinion data is showing absolutely the Israeli public is behind applying Israeli law to Judea and Samaria in whole or in parts. Immediately or gradually, but it's the discourse in Israel changed overnight. It's like everybody was just waiting to do something that it makes sense, it's constructive, that advances Israel's interests, that secures our future. And once this was demystified, it's extraordinary how the rapidity with which this has really become the mainstream conversation in Israel today. There is no other show in town, and it's really quite amazing. So, like I said, I went to that conference just thinking, okay, yeah, this is an important conference. It's another conference. I'm going to another conference. I went to another conference the next morning, and I came out of there. I was driving home and thinking to myself, oh my, now we have to really start, so now we have to have a practical discussion about how we implement it. And I think that that's really the next step that we have to take on this path because, all right, now we have this, let's make sure that we do it right, and that we don't make any stupid mistakes that we should have been able to figure out before we went forward. So I think that this is really amazing. I was obviously flattered to receive the award, but I was so empowered in that conference, and I'm so empowered as an Israeli, as a Jew, by what has happened here over the past 3 years. It's amazing.
Wow, I could hear it in your voice just sitting next to you. I hope you guys hear it too, but I totally hear from where you're coming from. Here you wrote something, and it was a pie-in-the-sky concept, and now it's being talked about and accepted, and hopefully it'll be implemented. Unbelievable. Properly, agreed. And your point about coming up with a policy paper so that it's done properly is
not a policy
critical.
paper. We have to really start working out the practical implications of this and move forward in a pragmatic and responsible way.
Right. Oh, amazing. Okay, I'm going to jump in. We didn't leave that topic yet, but someone wrote a very, very important question that I'm going to bring up with you. When are we going to start doing these videos in Hebrew?
אנחנו צריכים להתחיל לעשות את הסרטונים האלו בעברית מה שיותר מהר. אם אתה רוצה לחכות קצת בסוף, אז אנחנו יכולים לעשות את הכל מההתחלה בעברית.
Let me just tell you, it's part of the plan. We're waiting to make the timing work so we have the time to do English and Hebrew. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. We're getting her in Hebrew. We're making it happen. All right, but I don't want to leave the sovereignty issue yet, because before we went live, you mentioned something to me that I didn't pay attention to, and it's fascinating There was the whole left anti-sovereignty campaign and the big billboards across Israel and in Tel Aviv over the highways. And you mentioned something really, really important about that.
Yeah, I wish that I could say who it was who was a speaker at the conference, but I can't remember who it was. There were a lot of them who were saying really important things. But this one speaker at the conference was mentioning that, you know, for the first time, I think it was like a month and a half ago or something, these retired generals who were working with various American people, think tanks and things, these former generals have put together this initiative that's got, you know, millions and millions of dollars behind it to call for Israel to withdraw from Judea and Samaria, and, you know, again, call for it. Like, this is really new. What a great idea. Surrender. But anyway, so they were putting up all of these scare quotes in Arabic and Hebrew saying your kids are going to be speaking Arabic if we do this, and, you know, you're going to have all these Arabs around you and stuff. And so what the spokesman said, at first, they were absolutely smashed for this because it was a totally bigoted campaign, right? I mean, it was just like, it was just bigotry. And so they were smashed by it reasonably by the Arab list, the members of Knesset saying, what are you saying? You know, you don't want us to be part of Israel. So they took them down, I think, but the speaker at the conference who was mentioning this campaign was saying that, look, this is the left trying to put together an answer to us. That's never happened, at least not in the last generation. It's always the right rushing to catch up with the left or to argue with the left, and here you have the left arguing with the right, and that the agenda is being set by our side for the first time in over a generation, and that was what was so extraordinary about it. And again, you know, a lot of important statements and points were made at that conference. When was it? On Sunday night? And,
yes, 2 nights ago.
That really provided a lot of food for thought and was also extremely empowering. But that was one of them.
Yeah. So again, the fact that the left is reacting to a plan from the right, we're in a whole new ballgame.
Yeah, thank God.
Whole new ballgame. All right. So now we're going to
just have to make sure we don't screw it up.
We have to make sure we don't screw it up.
Don't screw it up. We're not going to screw it up.
Okay. So before we talk about us screwing it up, David Friedman. Let's go to the American side of things. David Friedman's confirmation hearing as U.S. ambassador to Israel is on Thursday.
Right.
What do you have to say about that?
He better get confirmed. First of all, I mean, it's really quite extraordinary that there's this sort of class warfare that's going on, that the American Jewish left has been attacking him because he's not fancy enough for them. You know, he's a bankruptcy lawyer as opposed to, you know, a PR executive, and really trying to belittle him and make him look classless, you know, déclassé, and in order to try to make it unpalatable for people to support him. But that just shows really how corralled off these elitists are from normal people. And, you know, it's not surprising that an elite class that is so snobbishly inclined towards everybody who isn't a member of their little clique, you know, that they've come up with all of these policy prescriptions on the Middle East, on domestic American policy, and on a whole host of issues that are completely crazy. Because if you're in your little tiny bubble where everybody has to look and talk and act like you and have the same values as you, and anybody who isn't in your little group is automatically, you know, just an ignoramus, you know, just if, you know, then obviously you're never going to have your ideas challenged. You're never going to have to see whether these even comport in any way, shape, or form with reality on the ground. And since they don't have to deal with the consequences of their policies, because they're all happy in their little, you know, elite little groups, then they never change their minds about anything, and they keep going on and on and on. So they have been attacking and trying to diminish the credibility of this guy. And I met him, and I've heard him speak, and he is really, really smart. And another thing about him is that he gets it. He lives in the real world. You know, he doesn't live in a bubble. He lives in a real world. A bankruptcy attorney is
that's
attorney.
Real.
That's real stuff, you know, that you have to really deal with failure. And that, you know, you have to figure out how to fix something and save somebody from failure,
Right.
and then rebuild it in a way that's going to succeed. You have your hands in the dirt all the time, and you have to figure out how to deal with it. This is the kind of guy. These are the kinds of skills that you want somebody to come into the public sphere with. You
Right.
want somebody who has lived in the real world, seen it, the hardest aspects of it, and then going in and basing policies on that, on reality. And so, by nominating him to serve, or designating him to serve as the next U.S. ambassador to Israel, first and foremost, what Donald Trump did, what the President Trump did, was he said, okay, from now on, I want to have my representative in the state of Israel be somebody who's going to be looking at things as they are, and not just sitting around and talking to his fancy pants friends.
Not based on utopian
and
values
also
and
not
ideas.
the people, either the set, they're interchangeable, the set in Tel Aviv and the set on the Upper West Side of New York City. These are the people that ambassadors talk to, and they never have their ideas challenged, and they always make sure that the questions stop just before the guy, wearing the orange T-shirt, or is known to be opposed to all of this nonsense, gets a chance to ask them something, because they don't want to be challenged. They live in their own little place. They have their millions of dollars in endowed professorships, and in their fancy think tanks, and in their PR firms, and in their publications, and they live in that chamber. So they don't want him. But America needs policymakers just as badly as Israel needs policymakers, just as badly as every country needs policymakers and ambassadors who live in the real world. That is David Friedman, and that's why it's so essential that this man get approved by the Senate on Thursday and come here as quickly as possible.
To me, one of the saddest things, and I'll get back to David Friedman in a second, there is no intellectual honesty on the left. Let's say that the two-state solution is not dead. Okay, I say it's dead. I think you believe it's dead. Let's say it's not dead. At least you must have questions that it's failing after 8 years of an Obama policy, that no matter how much he pressured and the Arabs did not come to the deal, there is no questioning about their principles of policy towards Israel. It has not changed. The left's policies, even after failure after failure after failure, they are not asking the questions, why has it failed? And maybe we have to adjust. Maybe we're not for sovereignty. Maybe something else, but the two-state solution, it looks like it's...
Because, obviously there's something else going on here, right? And I think that's the point, that's the elephant in the room that nobody ever wants to talk about, which is what really stands behind this two-state policy. What is this? Because you said it's failed. No, it was, or it died. It was never alive. The two-state fallacy has been dictating the course of events here for 90 years, right? Since the British Mandate, when they were trying to partition and trying to build two states and all the rest of it. And at its heart lays a premise, and the premise that lies at the heart of the two-state fallacy is that Israel is responsible for all the bad things in the world. It's just pure anti-Semitism. And if there was an Arab state built west of the Jordan River on land that Israel controls, then everything will be fine. And the side that is solely responsible for the absence of that state that will bring about utopia, heaven on earth, is Israel, right? So, when you realize that is the heart of the policy, then you also understand that bigotry itself, particularly anti-Semitism, is not impacted by reality. It goes on. It's not based on reality, right? It's based upon hatred. It's based upon an obsession. It's based upon irrational rejection of reason, inability to recognize reality. So that when you understand that the basic building block, the DNA of the two-state policy is to blame the Jews, then you understand why it never goes away, because people maintain their allegiance to that prejudice come hell or high water, and that's why it continues to be promoted and embraced, because it's a good way to hide the impulse that's at the heart of it, which is that the Jews are responsible, the Jews are guilty, and that they have to be cut down to size, and they have to be punished for all the bad things that come out of the Middle East. And so, that's what it's really all about. It was never alive to begin with.
So I love the direction of this conversation, because it brings up another blatant hypocrisy that media professionals and the intellectuals and the policymakers don't look in the mirror and see, or they don't want to. I was just interviewed on I-24 News, and she's asking me about the settlement law, and I'm going into, no, Israel has every right legally according to international law, 1920s. I was going back historically, and she goes, no history. We're talking about the implications now. I'm like, wait a second. You're saying I'm not allowed to go back into history saying we have all the rights and explaining why there's no such thing as Palestinians, but yet you go back to history saying it all belongs to them because they are the indigenous people and you stole their land. So how come you're always saying Jews can't talk history, but your whole basis for their rights is based on history?
No, it's based on fake history.
Thank you. Exactly. It's based on fake history. But they never look in the mirror on their own and realize.
Can we I know that you're right, and you have every reason. We all have reason to be frustrated by this thing. But okay, we've established, I think, that the left is not willing to take a look in the mirror. That they're not willing to look at reality. That they'd rather just accuse people who do look in the mirror and do look at reality and do live in the world, or the real world, of being evil or meanies or baddies or whatever.
So let's move on.
So let's just leave it at that, because I find it tiresome.
All right, so I'm going to go back to David Friedman, because I don't know whether you mentioned this to me or someone else mentioned it to me. Many people don't know where he came from. Why did Trump pick David Friedman? And what I heard is that David Friedman was Trump's bankruptcy lawyer.
Yep.
He saved Trump's business. He saved it. Trump is who he is today, in a sense. He did some things on his own, but he was saved from disaster.
Getting elected president.
Right. No, but
nobody helped him do that.
Right. But he was saved from financial disaster because of David Friedman.
Yeah, but first, before we even go into their relationship, which is interesting, but yes, it's true. It's based upon the fact that David Friedman was his bankruptcy lawyer, and David Friedman became Trump's friend because Trump reached out to him when his father passed away, and Trump paid a condolence call at his shiva, and he drove through a snowstorm to get there, and Friedman was, according to all the stories that have come out about it, it was completely shocked that Donald Trump would make the effort and come out to Long Island to go see him in the middle of a blizzard. Wow. To pay a condolence call for his father, who was an extraordinarily important modern Orthodox rabbi. Ronald Reagan came and had dinner at the Friedman's house early in his presidency, which is extraordinary. But David Friedman was amazed that they did that, and then they became a friendship blossom between the two colleagues as a result of that meeting. But the reason why I think it's important to mention Friedman, so he is Trump's ambassador designate. So so he'll have his hearing on the Hill on Thursday, and then so fine, and then he'll come here. But the problem is, and the reason why I said I wanted to mention it is because the far left Jewish pressure groups in the United States are on a warpath against him. J Street, Jewish Voices for Peace, and Trua, and all of these anti-Zionist organizations in the United States are posting petitions, are lobbying members of the Senate to vote against him. 600 J Street rabbis just signed an open letter opposing his nomination. These were all of the renter rabbis who were on board to attack everybody who criticized Obama for being so hateful towards Israel, and they were always coming out with front page ads or whatever in the full page ads in the New York Times saying how wonderful Obama is and how much they love Obama and how horrible it is for anybody. It's anti-Semitic for anybody to say that Obama is anti-Semitic for all of the horrible things that he did to the Jewish state. So these same people are now, gathering their forces to have a full court press against Friedman, and that's why I felt that it was necessary to talk about his nomination, because I think it's important, if for all of the people who support Trump, for all the people who support having an American foreign policy, particularly in relation to the Middle East, to Israel, that's based on reality, that's based upon what's good for America, what's good for the Middle East, what would promote the chances of peace and stability in this very, very difficult region. I think it's important for there to be a counter lobby, that people have to get on the telephone and call their senators, particularly Senator Rubio and Senator Corker, and tell them that they expect for Friedman to get confirmed on Thursday, and that they want him to be the next ambassador, because the president deserves to have the ambassador that he wants to have representing him in the state of Israel. So I think it's that's why I said let's talk about Friedman.
And can you give a sound bite, again, we're not cutting it down to 20 seconds, why he is the right person to be ambassador, best for America and best for Israel?
Because he understands that the United States has an extremely important ally in Israel, and he understands that it's that to have that alliance, Israel has to be strong, that the Americans have to stand up for their own rights, including the rights of their citizens to have freedom of worship in the holy places to Christianity in Israel, and recognizing that Jerusalem is the holy city to Jews and to Christians and to Muslims, and that the only sovereign that is going to ensure the freedom of worship of all members of all three religions is Israel, and that this is something that's important. This is something that standing by these basic principles and interests is going to empower the United States. Of course, it's going to be good for Israel to have the United States finally recognize our capital city by moving the embassy to Jerusalem after 70 years of insulting us with their embassy in Tel Aviv. These are all things that Friedman is going to undertake, is going to empower, and is going to move forward, I'm sure of it, as ambassador, and that's why it's important for all Americans who care about Israel, who care about American security, and who care about the rights of religious groups to have freedom in Israel and throughout the world, to stand by Friedman's appointment and tell their senators to approve him.
Now, there's some people there's some people watching who don't understand how there could be Jews who are so vehemently opposed to someone so close to the Jewish people and close and lover of Israel to become a ambassador to Israel. Any two words you could go into to explain for those people who don't understand that dichotomy?
Look, I mean, I've been, I get asked that question everywhere I go, and the short answer to it is that they don't have the best interests of the Jewish people at heart. They're not animated by Jewish principles when they're pushing this anti-Israel agenda, when they're pushing an agenda that is supposed to disempower, disenfranchise people who want a strong Israel and who understand the intrinsic importance of the American alliance with the state of Israel. And they're not, and that's all I feel like saying about these wonderful people, beyond what I say every single time that I'm asked about it.
Okay, yeah, and I'll just close that, and Joel Fletcher actually brought that question up, so Joel, thank you. Throughout history, and I think this applies to every people, but throughout history in the Jewish people, we've had some Jews that have been against their own people, and they've actually assisted our enemies in every single generation. What we're seeing today is the same thing throughout Jewish history. Big difference is, today we have our own country.
And the other difference is that today we have internet, so they get to put out their ideas so that everybody can see them and amplify them and think that they speak for all Jews when
they don't.
They speak for themselves and their computer terminal.
All right, so thanks for all that about David Friedman. Now I'm going to bring up the question everyone wants to hear about, right? You all told me, right? The Trump-Bibi-Netanyahu meeting. What do you have to say about what we're about to see, and also what we're about to hear and what we're not about to hear? I'm sure we're not going to hear everything
And
that's said and
I
not
don't
said.
want to make predictions because Netanyahu has kept his cards very close to his chest. So instead of making predictions about what we're going to hear tomorrow, which I may or may not be right about, I want to talk about what I'm certain that I'm correct about.
Go for it.
Okay?
Go for it.
So the first thing that I'm certain that I'm correct about is that Israel has never had a better political environment in Washington, D.C. in its history. We've never had an American president who is willing to throw out conventional wisdom, which has been wrong for so long about the Middle East, and really treat Israel as an ally. We've never had a situation on Capitol Hill where Israel has enjoyed such strong support, and I saw that a poll just came out yesterday or something that said that American support for Israel is at an all-time high.
Yeah, I saw that as well.
And a lot of Democrats who were towing Obama's line on Israel are now begging for meetings with Netanyahu,
Right.
because for the first time in 8 years, there's nobody in the White House who is coercing them into being hostile towards Israel and its democratically elected leaders. So I think, we've never had an environment like this. So that's the first thing. The preparations for this meeting just totally different from any preparations to any meeting that preceded Netanyahu's meetings with Obama, because this is just a completely new political game. Leaving aside, the shadow government and what Obama's doing and all the rest of it, first and foremost, on the face of things, we've never had anything like this before, which means that we have the opportunity to really develop a working alliance with the United States. Not an alliance in the headlines that's saying, what a great alliance, oh yes, and there's never been a better president for Israel, like we were all forced to say, or not we, but the government was forced to lie about it with Obama for 8 years with a gun pointing at, oh yeah, we love Obama. But, the climate is extraordinary. The need for real plans to push forward on a whole host of shared interests regarding Iran, regarding Syria, regarding the what's happening in the Arab world, in terms of the destruction of the Arab state system, the rise of jihadist forces seen, so graphically with ISIS, the rise of radical Islam in the West, and how that has joined together with the international left to really pose a threat to the wherewithal of nation states to defend themselves. I mean, I think that all of these things are areas that Israel and the United States now can build plans for how to contend with these very, very vicious threats to their security and in some cases, to their survival together. And that this is the kind of partnership that has to be built beginning tomorrow in the meeting. So I think that what isn't said at the press conference is going to be a lot more significant going forward than the questions that all the reporters are going to be asking them. Now, as to the questions that all the reporters are going to be asking them, right. I was interviewed this morning on Israel radio about, how do the Americans view the Palestinian issue, and what is that going to be like, and how can we expect? So the basic thing is this: the Americans realize the Trump administration, unlike the Bush administration and the Clinton administration, and of course Obama, realized that the Palestinian issue with Israel is not strategically significant for the United States, and they would be very happy to be as uninvolved in this as possible, because there's no vital American interest at stake, except to the extent that the Palestinian issue has been something that has weakened Israel over the years. They want less of it rather than more of it. And you see the same thing, of course, in the Arab world, where you have sort of Palestinian fatigue, PLO fatigue in place throughout the Sunni Arab world. And so this is just because people are realizing this is not a winning issue. This is not going to make things better. Empowering the Palestinians against Israel is just empowering global jihadists who are at large, and empowering all of these anti-Western forces that are really, that we see wearing, whatever vaginas on their head walking down the street in Washington. And, this is something that has to be neutralized. This is something that has to be minimized. So, in Israel, because the Palestinian issue is of existential importance to us, I mean, we can't survive with a Palestinian jihadist state in our heartland. So we are focused on it. Plus, it's become the epicenter of the national debate in Israel, that the most divisive issue in Israeli society. Right. And so our media is interested in it. There are, billions of dollars in money going into the PA and into these left-wing organizations that are funded by the EU mainly, that are supposed to make it impossible for Israel to move beyond this. But I think that whatever Netanyahu says, and he's under an enormous amount of pressure, and I'm glad of it, to not maintain his support for the establishment of a Palestinian state. I think that what we're seeing is minimization of the Palestinian issue, a dwarfing of it, intentional to try to cut it down to its proper size, which is just sort of a regional nuisance that shouldn't rise to the level of an American strategic interest.
I think that's a fascinating point. But I'm going to ask, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. How does that jive with Trump's repeatedly having said he wants to make the deal? He wants to make the deal of peace with us. Only he can do it. That sort of doesn't work according to the point you just made.
I think that
which I think makes sense.
Trump's position on this has still not been clarified to himself. I mean, he said in the interview that you're referring to with Yisrael Hayom that was published over the weekend, Boaz Bismuth, is that all of his advisors are saying that there's no chance of a deal. And then Trump is being pushed by State Department and the others to embrace this disaster of a policy. And so, he said, you probably shouldn't build new settlements, but, whatever. I think a lot of what he says is sort of, okay, so I said it, check. And we have to make sure that, I think the thing that the cabinet was so concerned about was so, was demanding that Netanyahu have a serious discussion about this before he leaves, is that Israel should not be in any way, shape, or form encouraging Trump to maintain allegiance to the establishment of a Palestinian terror state. And that this is just something that is devastating for Israel, and it does no good to the Americans. So I think that the main question was going to be not what Trump was going to say so much as what Netanyahu is going to say. Right. And if I read between the lines of things that the cabinet ministers Gilad Erdan and Naftali Bennett and Zev Elkin and others were saying in the conferences that the right wing has been holding for the past 2 days, specifically about these issues, specifically ahead of Netanyahu's visit with Trump, then I get the impression that the cabinet members themselves are feeling comfortable that he's not going to be doing that. So you will have, but said, time will tell.
So let me ask you from a different angle.
And I'm always prepared to be disappointed.
Okay, so not asking you to predict. Obviously, not asking you to predict what will be said, what won't be said. But what importance is there to the fact if the two-state solution is brought up, whether by Netanyahu or by Trump during their meeting and press conference?
And by the way, Trump hasn't said anything about Palestinian statehood.
Right. So I'm saying, and most probably it'll be coming from Bibi. But what importance is there if it is mentioned, or Bibi does mention it in part of their meetings?
Who's going to be the next president? Who's going to be the next president? Does anybody know? What we have right now is 4 years of the Trump administration. After that, we don't know. And so if you don't bury this anti-Semitic policy paradigm now, you're going to be stuck with it. And you have to assume you'll be stuck with it for, until we're dead. Wait,
so you're basically saying we should be worried if Bibi mentions two-state solution as part of their meetings?
This is an inherently anti-Semitic. Jew-hating paradigm that says blame the Jews for everything. And if we don't discredit it, if we don't kill it, and there are lots of different ways to skin a cat, as they say, but if we don't abandon this inherently hostile, bigoted, hateful paradigm that blames the Jews for everything, then we're going to be stuck with it. Because I don't know who's going to, I don't think that I would be making myself look, ridiculous to say that on November 7th, I was surprised that Trump won. I mean, by the end of the campaign, I thought he had a fairly good chance of winning, but, most people were completely shocked by this outcome. Right. So who's to say what's going to happen tomorrow? I mean, it was in many ways a miracle that he won. And, the people in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan voted Republican. Right. That was extraordinary. Right. And that was an unexpected turn of events. Right. So given the unlikelihood that he was even elected, why would we assume that this is going to be maintained over time? We have to be using this period, particularly now at the outset, to abandon the policies that we were forced into by successive U.S. administrations that misunderstood the nature of the Middle East, that inappropriately and with devastating effect embraced the lie of the centrality of the Palestinian war against Israel in their Middle East policymaking.
So we just heard two very important pieces of information from you. One, from your, and you have a lot. You say a lot of things. I'm just focusing on this one issue. From what you've heard from these conferences over the past few days, said by Likud ministers, it sounds like one, Bibi will not be bringing up the two-state solution to Trump, even though no predictions, but that's what it sounds like.
Well, I mean, if he were, then I'm surprised by the moderation, by the public statements of people like Gilad Erdogan and Zev Elkin and of course Naftali Bennett.
Right.
I would have expected them to make slightly different statements.
Got it. So that's point number one. And point number two is if Bibi does bring up the two-state solution, then that's not good news.
No.
All right, you heard it here, folks. All right, wonderful insight. All right, we're going. So that is the message. Bibi, if you're watching, since we know you are, please listen to what Caroline has to say.
Good luck. Have a great time. Don't bring up the two-state thing.
Don't bring up the... Oh, yeah. And I was going to say, listen, Bibi, if you haven't hired her as a foreign affairs advisor yet, here's your chance. Talking about foreign advisors, I'm going to jump to Michael Flynn.
Right.
Michael Flynn was the foreign policy advisor, national security advisor to President Trump, and he has just resigned because of something to do with his relationship with Russia or lying about some conversations he had with Russians. Why is this important for us? What's going on behind the scenes that we should know about?
Well, first, I think that we have to just put some things in context. I think it's very important. First and foremost, General Flynn his resignation is a huge loss to the cause of freedom, to American national security, and to stability in the region, and it has to be seen as such. I mean, he is amazing on the issues. I mean, his book, Field of Fight, is a textbook for how to think about national security policy for the United States. He gets it, and he is a maverick. He knows how to fight inside the system. He knows how to fight the system. He knows how to get things done. And an extraordinary mind, an extraordinary fighter, and that he was forced to resign is a huge problem. It's a huge loss, and it has to be seen as such. Second of all, I think, just to put some context into it, I mean, in Israel, we have been subjected over the years to a sort of coup d'etat of our bureaucracy against our elected leaders. We saw it most clearly with now deceased former Mossad director Meir Dagan, who gave a series of statements over the last years of his life that made clear that he had essentially overturned a decision by the prime minister to attack Iran's nuclear installations by informing the Obama administration of these top secret plans before they even became orders. And he was bragging about it, how he undermined Netanyahu, how he subverted unlawfully. He divulged highly classified, the most classified information to Leon Panetta, then defense secretary under the Obama administration, about Israeli plans to attack Iran's nuclear installations in 2010 and in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, certainly in 2010. And, he was able to do it. He by his own telling, this was something he had buy-in from the other security chiefs in Israel. And this was an effective coup. You have an elected leader, you have a defense minister, you have a prime minister, and you are undermining their lawful authority to determine these moves, to make these moves, to decide on these operations. In the United States, Obama really did a job on the CIA, which was always sort of a hard nut to crack for non-liberals, right? I mean, when he came into office, he and then Attorney General Eric Holder announced that they were going to open probes into CIA operatives who were interrogating terrorists. And that action had an extraordinary impact on the CIA, because if you're a CIA operations guy, and you're dealing with the bad guys, and now you're being threatened by the Attorney General of the United States with criminal probes into your operations, then you leave. And so, when people say that the CIA was out to get Flynn, as my colleague and friend David Goldman wrote in PJ Media just before Flynn resigned, this really was much worse than it seems on the face of things, and that this really that he said that the CIA really is out to get Flynn, and they got their pound of flesh, and this is very, very distressing, because I think, it goes to the heart of sort of the populist movement that animated Trump, that animates Brexit, that is becoming more powerful in Israel as well, which is that there's a sense we get it particularly because of our legal system, which is so impermeable and so closed off to democracy and to democratic norms. You're seeing people getting fed up with these inbred bureaucracies running the show, and it doesn't matter who's in and who's out.
Right.
They're the ones that are dictating the direction of a country. And, the big strategic threat or existential threat that Trumpism, such as it were, poses to these bureaucracies in the United States is self-evident. If you're saying that these policies are stupid, if you have a commander-in-chief who's willing to take his message directly to the public with tweets, 3 o'clock in the morning, then this is somebody that wants to drive a different agenda and to force you into line. And we see, again, we saw it very clearly with Dagan and what his posthumously published interview with Channel 2's Uvda program said. You really have to figure out very carefully, with a serious plan of how it is that you're going to take control over your bureaucracies. I mean, in a way, it's very similar to the criminal probe that's being carried out against Netanyahu. Okay. Right? When you look at this probe, right? I mean, what is he accused of, right? And who is involved, and why is he being the subject of a criminal probe for receiving cigars from an old friend of his? These are all, very curious turns of fate, and we all have to find out that his wife likes a certain kind of champagne, that are aimed, first of all, at destroying his public persona, destroying his reputation, shaming his wife, embarrassing them in public, and then criminalizing them by subjecting them to a constant drip, 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 drip of allegations of wrongdoing or criminal wrongdoing. And then that totally changes the way that the public views them, even if there's nothing behind it. And who's behind these, and who in the police is leaking all of this information to specific journalists, and always at certain moments, and it makes it sort of like a conspiracy, right? But the problem is that, I don't know, the term conspiracy has been bandied about to try to make people sound like they're crazy if they notice these patterns, and if they notice these developments, you're just conspiracy theorists. But why is it that all of these leaks are given to specific people? Who are the people who are determining what the media is going to be reporting? Because it's the leaker is much more interesting, here in this story, the person we don't see than the person that we do see making these allegations on the evening news. And we don't know who they are. And they're not accountable to us. We can't go to them and say to them, what are you doing? We don't know who you are. Yeah. And so it in the meantime, right, almost every other day you have the main primetime news broadcasts in Israel are leading with supposed developments in these criminal probes that in and of themselves don't amount to anything. I mean, one after the other, the one on the submarines has nothing to do with Netanyahu.